Hello and welcome to Behind the Saddle. My name's Liam, and today we've got TV presenter and racing presenter Rishi Persad. Hi, Rishi. Welcome to the show.
Hi Liam, thanks for having me on.
It's great. Have you been up so much lately?
Yeah, it's been fairly busy. Always busy at this time of the year. The jump season's getting a little bit more hectic. All the good horses coming out, and yeah, I've been doing one or two other bits and pieces as well. I did some snooker for ITV last week. It
Oh,
was the
great.
last one that ITV are responsible for producing. I think there's one tournament next year that they're booked to do, but it's not the same production team. So slightly emotional goodbyes to a few
Yeah,
friends,
yeah.
but hopefully we'll all keep in touch.
No, definitely, 100%. That's great to hear. So let's just take it all back, Rishi. So you're obviously your broadcasting career and your journey. So when did you realise broadcasting was for yourself, and how did you get into involved in it?
It's a good question. I still don't realise that broadcasting is for myself. Genuinely, it wasn't something that I had an ambition to do. What I didn't have an ambition to be a broadcaster. I had an ambition that I wanted to work in horse racing and I wanted to work in sport because that's what I loved. I love sport. I love racing. I've been involved with, or had an involvement, had an affinity for racing since I was, since I can remember. And same with sport, cricket. Loved cricket growing up in the West Indies. And I worked. I went to university, and I think my parents wanted me to be something better than I've probably turned out to be. They wanted. I think. Well, my dad was a lawyer, and my dad wanted. I think he wanted me to follow in his footsteps. But he also loved sport and he also loved racing. So he wasn't too disappointed that I didn't cut it in law. My mum was a bit disappointed that I didn't do something better initially, but she came around because she also liked racing. So yeah, I worked for I couldn't really get a job. I tried really hard to get a job in racing after I left university, but I struggled. I couldn't. Very few people even responded to my applications. And it was actually a friend of my mum's who got to be a PR company. So a little bit of a roundabout way to get in. And I started working for this PR company. It was called Sports Guide. And the guys there, at the time they worked for, they looked after Vodafone, and Vodafone were involved in Formula One and cricket, and obviously the Derby. So, in a sense, it was like the perfect fit because I was able to enjoy cricket and racing, and not such a huge fan of Formula One. I didn't.
Yeah.
Back in the day when Senna was around, I enjoyed it. But it was actually my boss at that PR company who wrote to At the Races back in 2002 when it was starting, the first At the Races. And I didn't even know he did that. So when they contacted me and said they wanted to screen test me, I was taken aback because I wasn't sure why they wanted to screen test me. He had written to At the Races. I went for the screen test and they said, right, here's some questions you need to answer on racing. You have to prepare. It was a day at Sandown I had to prepare. Military Gold Cup day. It's not always the easiest one to prepare because obviously a few of the riders you don't really know and things like that. But
Yeah, yeah.
I gave it a shot, and it was the week before Cheltenham 2002. I went for the screen test on the Friday, and on the Monday they offered me a job, and I started on May the 1st, 2002. So that's how it is. But it wasn't an ambition, and I hope I still come across as, I'm not. It's not something that I've always wanted to do. So I hope that keeps the fact that I've got perspective that this is, being on TV isn't the be all and end all. You have to remember, we're not doing anything hugely like.
Yeah, yeah.
It's great what we do, and I love it. I love it, and I'm very lucky. But I know in reality, it's important to keep your feet on the ground because there are lots of other things in life that are more important.
No, definitely, and I'd say it's very hard to get in the media, not just obviously, I can imagine back then, but obviously what it is compared to now, obviously it's a lot harder and obviously it's more advanced, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of six of one, half a dozen the other. I think it's possibly a bit easier to get into the media now because of the different platforms. Obviously,
Yeah,
lots.
yeah.
You can advertise yourself and you can get noticed a little bit easier than it would have
Yeah.
been to get noticed back in the mid '90s, the late '90s, as
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
trying to get into get a job in racing. So there are more platforms to advertise your skills, but because of that, it does mean that the competition's more fierce in some respects, and so as a consequence, perhaps you have to be very, very good to get in there, because there's so many people plying their trade and so many people wanting to advertise their skills of how good they are. Whether it's tipping, talking about racing, talking about the sport, and the topical things. But in the old days, there were less opportunities. But I guess it was also pretty hard back in those days as well. It was either on a newspaper, on television, or very, very few people managed to get on radio side of things. So challenging all the time, actually.
No, definitely, I can imagine. So, can you obviously, I don't know if that was when can you remember your first like day on camera? What was it like? Your first, was it huge or was it? I can imagine it
Oh,
was a big
nerve
deal.
It was really nerve wracking. So the day before, so the last day of April, we had to do. Obviously had to do a racing replay to go out the next day. So I was
Yeah,
given the task of doing racing replay. And funny enough, the guy who now runs ITV Racing, one of the main producers, a guy called Richard Willoughby, he was the one cutting or editing the highlights show the racing replay that I was doing. And we were at it till like midnight trying to do it well because we wanted to make it so good. And I was actually live the next day from early in the morning at Ascot. So it was Victoria Cup Day, 1st of May, on the Wednesday at Ascot in 2002. And Alice Plunkett was presenting. I was the pundit, and John McCririck was the betting
oh
expert.
yeah, John.
So the three of us did that day. I can vaguely remember one. There was a horse of Rod Millman's that won the 2-year-old race, a horse called Coconut Penang, in green and white colours, if I remember correctly. But that was 23 years ago, and obviously Alice had been well established on Channel 4.
Yeah, yeah.
Big Mac was Big Mac, so it was nerve
No,
wracking
exactly.
but fun.
Yeah, exactly. What would you think like your biggest what you've learned across all them 23 years?
Oh, good question. I've learned that I think I kind of mentioned it earlier. It's about keeping perspective. Nothing can ever you do in, or nothing we do in this world, broadcasting, in racing or in sport, is going to be. We're not going to change anyone's lives. We can make a small impact. We're doing what we can to make people enjoy the racing, or at least learn something, or maybe find out bits of information that they may not have got before. So it's always, remember where you came from, remember who you are, try not to get above yourself. Remember that the stars of the show are the horses and the jockeys, the horses in particular. That's what I fell in love with.
Yeah.
And no matter what happens with the politics, prize money, fixture list, tax, gambling, affordability checks, all of that, and I understand how difficult it is for the sport at the moment. But the thing that keeps me going is seeing the horses, seeing the stars, going to the races on a quiet day,
Yeah.
not knowing what you're going to see. You might see the next superstar. I remember going to Nottingham late in the year one day with I was working with Steve Mellish, and in the very first race, or one of the first races of the day, there was an odds-on favourite of William Haggis's called Storm the Stars running. And that was going to be that was one of the exciting horses, because he'd run once, and he was the odds on take all the beating, and he got beaten that day, and the horse that beat him was running for the first time, but it was a horse called Golden Horn. I remember watching it thinking, wow, the year down the line, we were like, wow, I was so lucky to be at Nottingham that day and Horn run for the first time. But that now, part of the job is that, and you go racing, you don't know what you're going to see, so.
No, you don't. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I wish people just, you appreciate, because that is very, very a privilege to be able to do that, to have that opportunity regularly, and to be paid to do it.
So yeah, definitely understand. You see it all the time, like Champions Day and stuff. Royal Ascot, we had 2 big prize winners there, didn't we? And you just obviously obviously from your point of view, it must be remarkable to see. Obviously, as well as you've done other stuff as well. You've done like Wimbledon as well, haven't you? And different other sports, as you mentioned before.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that, people listen to me talking and going, "Oh God, it's so boring listening to him saying the same thing over and over again." But genuinely, when you stand on centre court at Wimbledon and think, right, the only other player standing on the grass here at Wimbledon is me, and whoever the player is, whether it's Alcaraz or Sinner or one of the Williams sisters or
Yeah.
Sabalenka or whatever, and you're like, what am I doing here?
No.
I can't. Sometimes I stand there, even now after doing it for all these years. I sometimes still stand there and go, "What?" When you were a kid growing up, could you imagine saying to yourself,
No, no.
on centre court, talking to these, huge sports stars? I remember the time I interviewed Andy Murray after he'd won at Wimbledon, only just recently, and he'd played, and Roger Federer was in the royal box, and Andy Murray referred to Roger Federer, and Roger Federer was responding, and I was sort of the conduit between these two legends of tennis, and there I am standing in the middle. I'm just like, why are you there? What are you doing?
Yeah, but I feel like you've got to have your own personalities. No point, like obviously you've got like the likes of yourself, and you've got like Matt Chapman, which is he's a huge personality on television. Obviously, you mentioned John McCullough there. You know what I mean? He was massive as well. So I feel like you can't really copy a presenter in a way. You've just got to be yourself, haven't you, and show your like uniqueness as,
Yeah,
as a
I
presenter.
mean that's that. If anybody asks for advice in how you go about portraying yourself, there is no advice on how to portray yourself. The only
Yeah,
advice
yeah,
is be yourself, because it's the only one. It's the only method that will last for a lifetime. Otherwise, you'll get caught out not being yourself at some point. So it's
yeah,
important
yeah.
to be true to yourself.
No, definitely 100%. So let's look into the racing side of things. What's like a big race day look like for you behind the camera and as a presenter?
I'm so used to the routine now, but it's very so. So the bigger the race meeting, so for the Royal Ascots, the Derbies, Guineas, the Group One days, Cheltenham, this weekend it's the Betfair Chase, and the very
Yeah,
biggest days are actually some of the easiest ones to prepare for, because the horses, if you don't know the horses going into the big days, and you're really struggling, because
yeah, yeah,
those are the days where you've been following it, you know all the horses, you know where they've run. So sometimes those are actually the easiest ones to prepare for. So generally, like let's say, for example, leading up to Cheltenham, because you're also having a bet, right? You're also thinking,
yeah, exactly.
what
Yeah,
we're thinking about all the race. You watched the racing last weekend at Cheltenham. You're thinking about, what is there anything there that you saw that you might back? Everyone watched Final Demand or Kopek de Board or
yeah, yeah,
you go, oh, I might, am I interested in that? Is it going to make the market for something else? All that sort of stuff. So your mind is constantly thinking about these races, and then you get there and you've done the homework already, because this is part of your life. But then, of course, there'll be different topics to discuss, and there's the reflection on what's happened. So it's a question of staying on top of everything. So one of the other things I often tell people, anybody who asks for advice on the method of going through your work and being prepared, is it's really important to always stay on top of the topical elements of the sport, because you don't know when you're going to have to talk about it. And the other thing about that as well is, for those people who haven't had the opportunity to get into the sport in the media side, when that opportunity does come along, because for a lot of people they will get a chance, they may not take it, but one of the reasons that will help them take it is by being prepared, by always ready to go. So if tomorrow somebody said, right, Liam, you're going to have a screen test for ITV, and they said, okay, we are going to ask you about X, Y, and Z, and then in there they throw in, a few curveballs, and they ask you about, where do you stand on affordability checks? What do you think we should do about that? How do we police it better, or whatever? Maybe
yeah,
you don't
yeah.
have an answer, but at least have an understanding of what they're talking about, so
Okay.
that you can speak about it, and you can have a conversation with that without being uncomfortable. Um, and obviously, the other element is honesty. You can't bluff your
Honestly,
way.
yeah, definitely.
You can't bluff your way through this sport, especially racing. I think it's such a niche sport, in the sense that the things that most of the real racing fans know, only real racing fans know. Kind of, you
Yeah, exactly.
you can't bluff your way
No, you
through,
can't.
or or history, etc.
No, definitely. Obviously, what's it like interviewing like big personalities? Maybe obviously you said before about Andy Murray and stuff like that, but obviously in racing, what's it like interviewing all these trainers, jockeys, owners?
I think a lot of them are, so it's changed a lot. So when I first started in 2002, 2003, I remember I got told off when I first started because I was so in awe of all these people. Like I said,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
hadn't really been preparing myself mentally, having said all the things about Be Ready. I hadn't really mentally been prepared for having the opportunity to speak to these people. I wanted to work in racing. I knew about horses, I knew about form, and I knew about discussions about that sort of stuff. But I wasn't
yeah,
sure that I was entirely ready for the magnitude of being able to speak to Aiden, Sir Michael Stoute,
yeah,
all the top jockeys, And so I think to begin with, I probably just a little bit on the back foot. And I remember getting told off for calling Mr. Gosling and things like that. And I thought it was respect because I've been
yeah, yeah,
if you don't know somebody and they're older than you, Mister,
yeah,
um,
exactly, yeah.
show deference. And I was told, no, you just call them John, or
John,
whatever. Um, so it wasn't easy to begin with in that sense. And of course, I made mistakes. I still make mistakes. Um,
yeah, it's natural.
but I've become a little bit more. I take the mistakes I make a little easier and go, well, I didn't mean to. I'll try and do better next time. Whereas in past life, I used to feel so angst about it, and it would always be much worse in my head than it actually was. But a lot of the people who do it now, who the big names, they're so well. So obviously like John Gosden, Aidan O'Brien, they're so well versed in speaking to the media that sometimes I feel like I'm a fraud. I don't even have to hold the mic. I can literally give it to them and then say, "You guys just tell us whatever you
Crack
need,"
on, yeah,
because that's how easy it is. They make it easy for a lot of people. Some are harder, but a lot of people talk about Ryan. But Ryan, for example,
yeah,
Ryan,
yeah,
he's actually one of the easiest people to interview because you just ask about the race. You stick to the race. You
yeah,
stick to
yeah,
the course. You know, don't you know the boundaries with Ryan, and if you stick to what he's happy to talk about, he's great. And
yeah,
occasionally,
yeah,
a real nugget. I remember interviewing him at Royal Ascot after he won the Ribblesdale, and Pat Keating told me that the lady who was leading in the winner from the Ribblesdale was retiring at the end of the year, and just to give her a mention, and I mentioned it to Ryan as well, and then he actually completely unprompted reminded her that she led up the first ever Group 1 winner he had for Aiden, which was, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
And it sort of caught me by surprise that he immediately had that recall about what she'd brought to him so early in his career with Aiden. So you get moments like that.
no, definitely.
But it's simply a question of trying not to mess it up to begin with, and then
Yeah,
hopefully the interviewee responds to what you're asking, and that you make sure and you ask the right thing. Sometimes it's not always easy because it might be controversial, or sometimes you're so caught up in the moment that you might miss something. So hopefully that happens much more infrequently than it used to.
yeah, that was my next question coming on to. Has there ever been a moment where you thought, "Oh, how do I get out of this one?"
Oh, loads. I mean, I've made so many. I've done so much. I've done so many things that I look back on and go, "That was just stupid. What were you doing?" I remember, at the Arc years ago working for the BBC. I remember once asking Lester Piggott live on air, "What brings you here?" What you mean? I think he might have went, "What you mean the Arc?" Yeah,
Yeah,
you just you get sometimes you get like a brain freeze, and you get your mind. You're so careful of not messing it up that you actually
yeah,
you're not natural, and I didn't, and there've been times when that's happened. um I remember once calling the wrong horse coming towards me I was told to look out. I don't know if you remember, Liam, there was a horse called Racti, who was a very smart horse on the flat back in the day for Michael Jarvis, but he had a real behavioural problem, so he sometimes would lose it before the race. And I was sent to follow Racti when he was running Royal Ascot was at York, and I said to the guy who was at York Racecourse, who ticked the horses as they came off. He was allowed to be boxed over, and I said, "Is this the box with Racti?" And he said yes. Anyway, when the horse came off the box, we were doing this piece live. This horse that walked off was calm as a cucumber, really cool. Walked off the box, and as he walked past, he was about half the size of Racti, and I thought, that's not the horse, is it? So after I went
Oh
off
yeah, I
there,
think
I asked the lad leading the horse, I said, is that Racti? He goes, no. And it was actually a Henry Cecil horse that was running later in the day. I can't remember, something along those lines. I had to then go back on air and say, I'm really sorry that that wasn't the horse. You make a mistake like that. I think honesty is the main thing. And
yeah, definitely 100%.
but yeah, I mean, gosh, there's lots of mistakes. John McCrigg laughed in my face when I Bismarcked a 50-1 shot that won at Goodwood. I'm sure it wasn't the last time that I've done something stupid like that. Lots of mistakes, but hopefully I've done a couple of all right things as well in the last 20 odd years. So it balances itself out, hopefully.
No, I was just saying, I'm pretty being like obviously from in the media, you'd be bound to make mistakes. Everyone's bound to make mistakes, and obviously, you might obviously have such a fantastic career. What would you think? What would you say that something that you'd maybe change about racing going forward?
Something I'd change about. I mean, there's so many things that I would change. I mean, the first thing I would do is, from a political point, I would reduce the fixture list instantaneously. I would reduce the fixture list, which would automatically help with prize money. Automatically help with field sizes. It would not be well received across the board because obviously some racecourses will be hit by it, but it's an instant fix and we need it to be fixed instantly. I know that we need to also put in place a long-term strategy, but the problem with that is racing is so far or so close to the precipice that we haven't got all the time in the world to wait for a long-term strategy. So
Yeah.
I would move quickly on that. I do feel that it's really important. The other thing that I've tried really hard to make representations through the Jockey Club, who I'm part of, to the BHA. I've tried in every way I can to get some traction for when it comes to affordability checks, to make people understand that the issues in the world of addiction, it's not specifically about gambling. Gambling is like an activity like anything else, drinking, smoking. Addiction is not. It's not gambling specific. Anybody who is involved in the industry of well-being will tell you that being addicted to gambling is not about gambling. It is about the addiction, and the addiction could be anything. If you stop somebody with an addictive behavior gambling, and you basically, if we closed every betting shop, deleted all apps and closed all bookmakers, that person's addictive nature is still existing. So it's treating the addiction, not so much the gambling. And the idea of affordability checks coming in and therefore having a knock-on effect to people without issues of addiction and having issues with people who bet without any issues, which is the majority of people who bet, then it has that unnecessary effect on them when it doesn't actually help the person. Affordability checks is basically like someone going, well, here's an alcoholic who's been drinking at the bar, and I've said to him, you can't drink anymore, you've got to go home. Okay, so that person's gone home. Have they stopped their addiction? No, they haven't.
No.
So if I want to have a bet with you, if I want to have a bet with someone and you go, oh, no, you can't afford it anymore. You can't bet with me anymore. The end, stop, right. But what happens to my problem? You haven't fixed it. You haven't done anything. All you've done is you just shifted the responsibility away from yourself. So I've tried really hard I've got people to who know more about it than me explain it hopefully better than I have,
Yeah.
to make representations, and I've got nowhere. And I suppose that's indicative of the fact that the sport is in so many areas of crisis that it doesn't have time to listen to everything everybody says. But I don't know what more I can do at the moment. But those are the two things that off the top of
Yeah.
my head that I would love to be able to have an effect on and have some change.
No, I say, and hopefully they do come out and obviously listen to your views a lot more, and obviously what you've said, which I totally agree on as well. And obviously we had the conversation not so long ago with Richard Hoyles. He come on the show a couple of weeks ago, and I obviously he talked about the fixing congestion and stuff like that. And I was watching IT racing on the weekend. Obviously Ruby was I think it was the opening show, I think, on ITV, and he was talking about automated being yeah, so Nace got cancelled in Ireland, and obviously they said that obviously Nace will put the fixture on today for
Yeah.
the exact same entries and stuff like that. And obviously, I think racing's different to what England and Ireland did. I think the rules are a little bit different, are they?
I would imagine in Ireland it's probably easier to move because obviously there's quite often there's a rest day during the
Yeah,
week,
yeah,
so you can shift fixtures perhaps when on that rest day, and there's a bit more dexterity, I think, in how they. In fairness, though, in the UK we have shown when we lose big races, especially during the winter, we do try
yeah.
our best to rescue those big races and stage them where we can. It doesn't always happen, but I think having that dexterity is really important at all levels, wherever you are, because but we say the big races, but we don't have to keep the fixture list as bloated as it has been. We
No,
can,
definitely, yeah,
some weak fixtures. Just look at the field sizes at the moment in the UK. They are Cheltenham on 3 days at Cheltenham. Was the quality worthy of Cheltenham? Certainly not as deep in quality as years gone by.
yeah,
I was working with Steve Mellish recently on the weekend, and we were talking about saying to him, the days when you'd have it was the Mackerson or another. There's a horse of the Duke's called Another Coral that I used to remember running in it every year in all those big races, but the fields were really competitive. The handicap to get into the handicap, you needed to be higher rated. Now you're looking at horses in the 130s winning these. Whether it's the Greatwood or the Paddy Power Gold Cup, whereas you needed a better class of horse. A Bradbury Star, a horse that was good enough to go close in a King George type thing. So it affects the quality. The quality certainly has been dimmed, but we've run out. We don't have that many good horses in the UK. Certainly since the likes
no,
of Denman, it's got pretty thin.
no. And obviously, touch on your earlier points. And I've spoke to jockeys about this and stuff like that, as well as Richard and stuff here. People who'll be on the show. How much do you think mental health is big in racing? Do you think it's getting better or?
I think we're becoming more aware of it. I don't think we do enough. I think
Yeah,
Racing Welfare do a great job, but they can't cover everything. And again, I'm lucky enough to work or to be a trustee with the Racing Foundation, and the Racing Foundation involved with the Industry People Board, and Industry People Board are trying to do more on the well-being side, but they've taken a bit of time to create their strategy, and everything's a little bit slow to gather momentum. But I feel like there is some happening at the moment, but I don't think it's good enough at the moment for across the board in sport. I mean, for example, the BHA signed an agreement to be part of in their charter to be part of mental health and sport across the industry, and
yeah,
it's aligned to other sporting bodies who also have done that. But I couldn't tell you what the BHA have specifically done in that area. I don't know if they have done anything or if they've just passed it on to Racing Welfare and that counts as their responsibility.
yeah,
And there's an element of that over the years, who's in charge? I don't really know who's in charge of that particular element, mental health or well-being. So the industry people boards come along now, and they are doing more, and they've created a strategy which they hopefully produce better results over a period of time. But as we know, in the last couple of years, in the last few months, there have been a
Yeah.
couple of tragic cases, and could something have been done about that? I hope that there's some sort of follow up to this to say, well, did we miss anything? Could we make sure that this doesn't? Could we make sure in the same circumstances this can't happen again? Because if we're not learning, then these
Yeah.
awful incidents, what's the legacy of it? Just tragedy. Can we
No,
not
definitely.
get something out of it that helps us for the future?
No, definitely 100% agree. And obviously, if there's anyone out there who is struggling, obviously, just all, everyone's got a voice, and obviously, we'll all listen and that you be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, Racing Welfare do a great job, and if anybody has any concerns or issues, then please get in touch with them.
No, definitely. So moving on to the sport, Rishi, and obviously the stories behind it all. Obviously, you've presented on being to numerous racetracks across the country and around the world. What's been like the one that stands out the most for you? Obviously, there's big meetings, obviously Cheltenham, Aintree, the Grand National, Ascot. What would you say your biggest one is?
I mean, you can imagine I get asked a lot. What's your favourite event to go to? And
Yeah,
I find it very hard to do. As you can imagine, I'm very lucky because I get to work at so many great events, whether it's in
yeah,
horse racing or not. But in racing, the thing I love most is the best competitions. So
yeah,
Cheltenham, if we're being entirely honest, it's not as competitive as it once was. The days of Cheltenham being race one to the final race on the Friday or the Thursday, as it was. Those days of it being every race being an absolute minefield in trying to find the horses who are going to win because there's so many horses with chances in every race. They're
yeah,
gone. Too many odds-on shots. So that's
yeah,
dimmed Scotland for me, if I'm being entirely honest. Royal Ascot, I really enjoy it because it's a great. It's more competitive.
yeah,
But there are maybe a couple of races that I don't feel are entirely worthy of their spot on that, but it's more competitive. The Derby's always been one of my favourite races because I think it's still the greatest test of a racehorse anywhere in the world. The actual physical test of what they have to do, beforehand, go up and hill, down, mile and a half, camber, coming down the hill into the straight and all that. Stiff, really stiff mile and a half. I love that race. I think it's a shame it hasn't kept its position worldwide at that level. So I'm hoping that the Derby can come back. I suppose if I had to choose one, and this is a long-winded way of saying I really don't want to, I'd probably say, I love the international element. So I love the Dubai World Cup because
yeah,
it's one really big night, and there's a combination of dirt and turf that I enjoy. The Breeders' Cup, probably
yeah.
just make it by half a length. But it's close. But the Breeders' Cup, because it's you get America, Europe, in Europe you've got France, Ireland, England, Germany, maybe, who knows. But you've got Japanese now really adding to it. And then there are horses that have come from South America that make it to States, etc. So it's a really good mix of international competitors. And there's ever since I was a young boy growing up and looking at the Breeders' Cup races, one of my favourite memories was Leicester winning on Royal Academy when he came out of retirement. That still remains one of the greatest things I've ever seen in sport.
Yeah.
The commentary, the old man Lester Piggott, out of retirement and beating the best with an incredible ride on a horse who was a doubtful stay at the trip, and typical Leicester holding him up, rat-a-tat-tat down the outside, and some amazing memories from the Breeders' Cup. And now I'm lucky enough to work on it. I really enjoy that meeting, and I could carry on working there for the rest of my life. I love that. I love that meeting.
No, I was saying obviously them memories will stick with you forever, won't they? Obviously throughout
Yeah.
your whole career now and so on. Obviously, the meetings I love is probably, and I like Gloria's Goodwood. I really
Yeah.
like that. Obviously, I'm quite close to. Obviously, I'm from Liverpool myself, so obviously I'm quite close to Aintree, not far away from there. So obviously, I go there every year.
What's
And
been your favourite
also,
national?
You know what? I loved last year's one when Nick Rocket won it.
Yeah.
I really like, yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, yeah. Well, I didn't back it, unfortunately. Oh, maybe I might back it this year. His run next year. But no, obviously, I really like the festival. Obviously, I go there. Obviously, not being too far away, so I do go there quite a lot. And I like Chester as well. In
Yeah.
May. Which is
Yeah.
about, 'cause I really like Chester's course. I obviously not being too far away from there myself as well, but I really like when the sun's shining and Chester, you can't beat it.
It's a beautiful place. Actually, the atmosphere when the sun's shining and it's that
Yeah.
springtime, exciting time of the year. Yeah, it's a great meeting. I haven't done it for years, but when Channel 4 used to cover it, I was a regular there at Chester. I used to love that. I mean,
Yeah, it's a great
we
game.
are very lucky, especially doing the job we
Yeah.
do to go to all these different meetings. So I feel bad choosing anyone above the other. Yeah, you asked the question, so I had to give you an honest
No,
answer.
exactly, yeah. Oh, so obviously, with the sport evolving all the time and stuff, and obviously I know people have different views and there's loads of politics involved. What would you say the biggest misconception about racing is?
Well, the welfare issue remains. You
Yeah.
know, I think a lot of people. I think the misconception comes from both sides on welfare.
Yeah.
So there are people out there who don't quite appreciate just how well looked after the horses are. Now, I'm not saying it's always across the board. There will always be rogue elements, but in general, you feel very trustworthy of the people looking after horses in the sport. Um, okay, you can't cover every single base, but most of the time, I feel like I can have confidence as a person who loves the sport that that's the case. But obviously, people who don't know that much about it and the animal welfare organisations, they're always looking for an angle in. They're always looking, trying to criticise the sport, and they don't really have an entirely accurate appreciation, similar to what we do, or at least what a lot of people who care for the horses at the ground level do. But then flip that around to, I don't think enough people in racing understand that there's an element of society where they don't understand, and so they, in their innocent belief that they think they're doing their best, that they suddenly think, okay, well, we don't understand the dangers of what these people think, because obviously they can help form policy for governments. You know, if governments want to win elections, I mean, the Labour manifesto included a discussion about the whip. You know, not the Labour manifesto 2 manifestos ago, prior to their recent
Yeah.
uh, election, and in that regard, you know, it's important to have a discussion, therefore, within the sport about the whip. And then obviously there are some
Yeah.
people who are going, well, why are we doing this? Why are we pandering to the, well, because the danger is real. I'm not saying that it's not a conversation worth having, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we need to show that we can govern ourselves. We need to show that there is this danger that lurks from an element of society that has an influence in the policy on the policymakers, and therefore we need to be able to say, well, we're on top of that. Actually, we are doing our research, we are doing the work, we are doing our due diligence on these matters, and you don't have to take that power away from us, because we're on the case. And so I think the welfare aspect, from both sides, there's an element of misconception from people outside the sport, but also people within it.
No, yeah, definitely 100% agree. What would you say, how do you think we can, as racing, obviously fans and obviously you being involved in racing, how do you think we can attract new audiences and new people wanting to get involved in racing? And
Um, I've always, again, I'm not repeating this if anybody's heard me speak before, but families, you know, the majority of people that I know, myself included, are lifelong fans because of the element of sharing stuff with, you know, family, whether it was my dad, you know, so many of our friends, so many of the people I work with in racing. You know, I can tell you pretty much everybody I work with. You know, I think of you know, Nick Luck, his family were involved in the sport. Tom Stanley. There was an element of, I think, obviously Ollie. I think to Ed Chamberlain, he always talks about the Grand National and seeing, sharing. Okay, there's some people who are born in it, like Francesca, who's obviously, her family, but a lot of people who work on that side of the racing, or people who are involved in it, they talk about the fact that it was the relationship. I mean, Lydia talks about her parent, her father, and the people that got her into it. It's those relationships bond when you share experiences. It's just like football. The idea of going and watching a football match with your family, cheering the same teams or whatever, and sharing those emotional moments when a team does well, or the disappointment when they do badly. That bonds you not just with your family, but it bonds you with the sport for life. And that's what we need to be doing more of. We've got to get people bonded with the sport from an early age. I know the 18-25s, and you want to get a younger crowd in and all that. But does that get you a fan for life? Or does that get you somebody who comes along and has a nice time at the races and goes, oh, I like entertainment at the races, but am I a lifelong fan? Do I feel the passion for, am I getting excited about the fact that coming up to Cheltenham, there's a possibility of a big clash between, I don't know, Constitution Hill, the New Lion, and Lossiemouth? Are they excited by that, or are they excited about a day out of the races? Because a day out of the races is entertainment, and entertainment can be replicated anywhere else. A day at the races, where you go there to watch the action, to watch Lossiemouth against New Line, and hopefully all three of them at their best. But Lossiemouth, New Line, and Constitution Hill going head-to-head in the Champion Hurdle, watching the three of those horses, that can't be replicated anywhere else. And that's only congruent to somebody who actually loves the sport. And that person who loves the sport is going to be a fan for life, as opposed to somebody who likes a day out of the races. And I don't think we are doing enough to create fans for life. We're doing as much as they are doing stuff to market the sport, get more people through the gate, come and have day racing and watch concert and all that sort of stuff. But are we creating fans for life enough? I don't think we're doing that.
No, exactly. Obviously, one of our values of the channel is obviously to try and inspire and try and educate more people into the sport. Obviously, not just horse racing, but other equestrian, such as equestrian dressage, not just horse racing in general. Obviously, we go to a lot of local riding schools, and obviously, it's so sad to see because a lot of them are closing down. Obviously, these children who obviously want to get involved, and obviously it's the future of the sport, and obviously all these, it's either getting closed down for putting houses on there and stuff like that, which it is sad to see. And obviously, but there's not just that as well. There's so many more careers in racing than just being a jockey. There's so much more. There's not that people don't even realise how many careers there actually is in racing, and not just racing, equestrian in general. Obviously, we went down to the Doncaster National Horse Racing College, and that was unbelievable. It was really great to go there and obviously see all the students there who are developing, obviously from week 1 to week 12, and then obviously they go into different yards and stuff like that. But obviously it was great to go down there and see what they have to offer as well.
Yeah, actually, I remember going to the Northern Racing College when I rode in the charity race a few years ago. I met a lovely guy there called Reed, who was a ex-jockey and a jockey coach, and there's some really nice people that I was lucky enough to spend a bit of time with there. It was superb, and yeah, you're right. Trying to let people know that it's not, a simple pyramid, that it's all to do with jockeys or stable staff. There are a whole host of options. There are certain things. There's the Racing Media Academy that try to offer options in the media side of things and give students every year a different perspective, and you can work with different media organizations of racing. And there are more things now. There's obviously the Godolphin Flying Start. There's the grad scheme. There are things to get those, racing to school that will get people hopefully involved and their eyes on racing from an early age. So there are more people trying to educate people that racing is not just all about one thing or a limited opportunities. There are much more available to them, because there are, and the more that can be broadcast and advertised, you know that it's a more holistic sport that has a huge number of opportunities for people.
Yeah.
Despite, whatever level, if there's some people who love racing but don't want to go anywhere near a horse. Well, there's lots of different things you can do in the sport in that respect.
No, definitely. And if everyone who is watching wants to get involved, obviously head over to the BRS and obviously what Rishi's mentioned there as well, other facilities around the country that you can go to and start up. So Rishi, we're gonna have a little game now. We're gonna play a little game. So we're gonna
Oh,
so we're gonna have a little game now. So I'm gonna mention a list of people or events, or I'm just gonna like mention in one word. Just gotta produce one word for it.
okay.
Is that okay?
You
So
mention
which
it, and I say one word about it.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, what
Okay,
one word to describe it? So
all
the
right.
Cheltenham Festival,
Superb,
AP McCoy,
unbeatable,
the Derby,
supreme,
the Grand National,
challenging,
Matt Chapman.
challenging.
Favorite racehorse you've watched?
Corto,
Uh, and Rishi Persad.
lucky.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much, for that Rishi. Just one more question. What's
Yeah.
one bit of advice you'd give to anyone who wants to grow up in the sport or wants to get involved in the sport, or maybe go into media broadcasting?
For anybody who wants to get in the sport, I presume you want to get in the sport because you already have an interest in it, which is great. Whatever happens, always keep the perspective of why it is you love that sport, because there will be times when it will become challenging, where you're struggling to get an opportunity or things aren't going that well. And sometimes, even in the work that we do, we go, oh, this isn't great, or that's not great, I'm not enjoying this or that. And then you just see, remember, the horses come along and you think, that's why I love it. I love it because I love those horses and I love seeing them compete and I love seeing who the next star is. And that even sometimes there's not a star. I mean, there's some horses that will never get higher than, say, a mark of 70 on the flat or 120 over hurdles or whatever. And I absolutely adore them. I could list off. Look, there's a horse called Roundhay Park on the flat, trained by Nigel Tinkler, that Faye McManaman rode, and I know not Alex Jerry rides a bit now, but I absolutely adore that horse. I don't think he's ever run without carrying my cash. There's a horse in Guardians called Novak who runs on the all weather at Newcastle all the time. Again, I love that horse. I follow him, so it doesn't have to be at the top level all the time. I love it. I love the racing. I love these horses. I love seeing how their careers unfold, no matter what level, So never forget that. And if you do want to get into the media side of things, if you do want to get involved in trying to make it in that particular world, I always say and I'll refer to it again, sometimes the opportunities take a while to come around, but they will. Believe that they will, and they will. And always be ready for when that opportunity comes around. Don't have any regrets. Don't go, I wish I'd been better prepared. I wish I'd. Just always stay on top of things. Always try as much as you can. I know it's not possible to cover every base, but as much as you can, always try and be ready for when that opportunity comes along. Because you never know when it'll come. You never know. But the last thing you want is to regret missing it.
No, that's great, that Rishi, and obviously amazing words. And I would say thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been an honour to
My
have you
pleasure.
on here. And obviously you had a fantastic career, and obviously I'll continue to watch yourself going
Yeah.
forward, and hopefully I'll see you at a race course in the near future.
Liam, that's lovely. I hope we bump into each other at Chester.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. That'll
Yeah,
be good.
yeah. All right, pal. Thank you.
All right, cheers. Thank you, Rishi.
All the best.